That day at the playground started out like any other practice session. Familiar, routine. The air was warm, the sun was dipping below the horizon, and the team was winding down. I had spent hours pushing myself, working harder than ever. My coach, always supportive, always pushing me to improve, was someone I deeply respected. His presence was commanding, tall, strong, and always composed. You couldn't help but notice him. His friend, who occasionally came by to assist, had a similar confidence, but with an added intensity that set him apart. As practice ended, the team slowly made their way to the changing rooms. Exhausted but pleased with my performance, I was ready to clean up and head home. My muscles ached, and I was looking forward to a hot shower. The changing room was empty when I arrived, the familiar scent of sweat and effort filling the air. I undressed slowly, peeling off my sweaty clothes, the cool air against my skin a relief. Just as I was about to step into the shower, the door creaked open. My coach walked in. At first, it seemed like nothing out of the ordinary. He often stayed behind to check on equipment, but today there was something different in his eyes, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. His friend followed closely, closing the door softly behind him. The atmosphere felt different, charged in a way that made my heart race. My coach smiled at me, the same encouraging smile I had seen countless times, but this time it felt off, laced with something I couldn't quite grasp. "We need to talk," he said calmly, but there was an edge to his voice. I nodded, unsure of what was going on. His friend, standing beside him, looked me over with a gaze that made me feel more exposed than I already was. I quickly wrapped a towel around myself, trying to shake the nervousness building inside me. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking, that this was just another conversation. But as they stepped closer, the air in the room grew heavier. My coach leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, while his friend stood only a few feet away. There was something in their eyes, something that sent a shiver down my spine. "We've noticed you," his friend said, his voice low and smooth. "You've got a lot of potential, not just in the game, but in other areas too." The words lingered in the air, their meaning unclear, but the way he said it, with that sly smile, made my pulse quicken. Before I could respond, my coach stepped forward, his gaze locked on mine, intense and unyielding. "You've been working hard," he said softly, his words carrying a weight that was hard to ignore. "We've seen how much you've grown, but dedication can be shown in more ways than just on the field." His tone was different. There was something more, something I hadn't noticed before. A heat behind his words that made me feel both intrigued and uneasy. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to say, my mind racing. There was a hidden meaning in their words, something unspoken but palpable in the air. His friend moved closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his body, the tension between us undeniable. He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. In that moment, everything felt surreal, like time itself had slowed. My pulse quickened, and an unexpected thrill coursed through me. "Relax," he said softly, his voice soothing. "We're here to help you realize your full potential." Though his tone was calm, the weight behind his words was undeniable. I wasn't just being noticed for my performance anymore. There was something deeper they saw in me, something that went beyond the field. I felt the magnetic pull of their presence, drawing me in. I glanced at my coach, searching for some kind of reassurance, but all I saw was the same intensity, the same silent invitation. It was a dangerous game they were playing, and I was caught in the middle. His friend moved closer, erasing the remaining space between us, his breath warm against my skin. The desire in his eyes was unmistakable, an unspoken invitation in the way he looked at me. It was both thrilling and terrifying. For a moment, I considered stepping back, leaving, pretending none of this had happened. But something held me there, something in the way they looked at me, in the way my body responded to the tension in the air. My coach took a step forward, his hand resting gently on my shoulder, firm yet soft, sending a wave of heat through me. My pulse raced, skin tingling with a mix of fear and anticipation. "We're not going to do anything you don't want," he said, his voice quiet yet reassuring. "But we can see you're curious." And he was right. I was curious about what this would lead to, curious about what they wanted from me. There was a thrill in the unknown, in the danger, and despite the voice in my head warning me to leave, I stayed. His friend reached out, gently tilting my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. "You're safe with us," he murmured, his eyes locking with mine. The words were meant to comfort, but they only deepened the intensity. The unspoken tension filled the room, the electricity between us undeniable. Time seemed to stand still, the world outside fading away. All that remained was the heat of the moment, the magnetic pull of their presence, and the undeniable attraction. I stood frozen, my mind racing with possibilities. I could leave, I could walk out, and never look back. But I stayed, held there by something I couldn't fully understand. My coach's hand moved from my shoulder, trailing down my arm in a slow, deliberate motion. His touch sent a shiver through me. I couldn't deny the excitement, the thrill of being caught in something so forbidden, so dangerous. His friend's hand still held my chin, his thumb brushing softly against my skin, amplifying the tension in the air. I had never experienced anything like this before. The thrill, the excitement, the danger. As their touches grew bolder, my emotions swirled. Fear, excitement, curiosity, all blending together. I was caught in the moment, unable to pull away, unable to stop the rush of desire that coursed through me. Every movement seemed planned, as if they had known this would happen all along. The room was charged with energy, our breaths filling the air as their hands explored. The intensity grew with every touch, the suspense thickening, drawing me deeper into this web. There was no going back now, and I didn't want to. The game had changed, and I was a willing player, enticed by the suspense of what was to come. His friend's hand trailed down my neck, grazing my collarbone, making my breath hitch. My coach's voice broke through the haze in my mind, soft but commanding. "You don't have to be afraid," he murmured, locking eyes with me. "You can trust us." His words both comforted me and made me feel even more vulnerable. His hand rested on my waist, his fingers lightly brushing my skin, electricity sparking between us. Despite the storm of doubts in my mind, my body moved on its own, leaning into their touch, surrendering to the intensity. It was a choice, a moment that would change everything. My coach's friend moved behind me, his presence so close, his touch sending shivers down my spine. Trapped between them, I didn't want to escape. Instead, I found myself drawn deeper into the unfolding moment. "You deserve a reward for all your hard work," my coach whispered, his words hanging in the air with an edge of promise. His hand moved to the small of my back, pulling me closer. The intensity of the moment stretched time, the universe itself seeming to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I felt his friend's hands on my shoulders, firm but controlled, as the power dynamic between us shifted, heightening the excitement. "You can stop this anytime," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. But I didn't say anything, and that silence was my answer. In that moment, I let go of my doubts, my fears. I allowed myself to be swept away by the unknown, the excitement of crossing a line I never thought I would. The night unfolded with intensity and suspense, each touch, each glance a step deeper into the unknown. As hours passed, the tension ebbed, leaving me breathless, my mind spinning from the whirlwind of emotions. I looked at them, both watching me with knowing smiles. No words were needed. We all understood what had just happened. Things would never be the same. As I left that night, a strange exhilaration and anticipation filled me. The thrill of what had happened lingered, and I couldn't help but wonder what might come next.